Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Well, as promised, here I am, and I'm going to sort of like just teach you guys some of the few techniques that I use when I do Lightroom editing. So basically, from the exact workflow of how I actually do all these sort of edits. Um, so over here, what I actually have is a raw file which I actually shot with an EOS R. So this raw file is taken from from the EOS R itself. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start showing you guys how how my workflow actually works. So basically, I usually will bring in my stuff into Lightroom first, and then I will, you know, do a more elaborate edit in Photoshop. So in this case, um, this is how I usually start the screen. So usually here I am in Lightroom. So the first thing that I usually do is I start developing the pictures. Um, so I'll go to the develop tab. I'm just going to press Y here because it just had before and after. So over here, what I usually tend to like doing is I first like to adjust the color temperature. So over here, I'm actually going to adjust the temperature to be just a little bit warmer. So I'm just gonna give it a slight warmer tone first, right? And after I've done with that, I am actually going to bring the exposure down just a little. And what I usually like doing every time when I edit pictures is I always like to play around with the extremes just to see what will happen with the picture. So because this picture is actually a raw picture, I have more room to play around with. So in this case, I'm not too afraid to sort of like stretch the picture to its extreme. So I'm just gonna bring the picture exposure down just a little just to see what happens. So in this case, I actually want to bring the exposure up just a little, and I'm going to try my very best not to overexpose the background, because you really need to protect this part here in the back, because this part, if you notice, is slightly overexposed, but that's pretty much quite normal, simply because the dynamic range of the shot is quite high. The difference between the background, this part here, the brightest part here, is definitely way more brighter than what we have here in the mid-tones from the bride and groom, the couple here. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the contrast up just a little. And every time when you notice when you bring the contrast down, contrast up, sorry, you'll always notice that the blacks will get a bit blacker. So what you need to do is with Lightroom, is always a game of a balancing act. So basically, sometimes when you bring something up, you must definitely compensate something else in order to balance the picture. So in this case, because I brought the contrast up, the black tones in the hair starts to get really dark, and it starts to crush the blacks that you can't really see much detail in the black tones. So what I'm going to do to compensate for that is I'm going to bring the shadows up, right? And I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, this is a lovely couple, Aina and Azrin here. Anyway, so I'm just going to bring it up a bit closer so you can see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the shadows up ever so slightly. So now you can start seeing that the detail in the hair is not that lost and not crushed into the blacks. So I'm quite happy with that right now. The shadows are looking quite alright. Next, what I like to do is I am actually going to use the brush tool, and I'm going to up the exposure for the brush tool here, and I'm just going to put it somewhere around maybe about 68 or so. So in here, I am going to brush the face where the highlights are. So this will actually give the face a slightly more 3D sort of like look, and it wouldn't make it look too flat because now you are emphasizing the highlights of the face. So I'm going to do the same thing as well on the groom's face here. So I'm just going to highlight and brush that part of the face, and also balancing it out on the neck as well, and maybe just make it just a bit brighter as well on the hair part here, right? Right, so I'm quite happy with that so far. So I'm just gonna zoom out just to see how it is. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a quick before and after. I'm just gonna press Y just to have a look. So immediately you can start seeing that the picture that I've edited is looking a bit warmer, and it looks less sterile than what it looked like when it first came out from the camera. So it looks a bit warmer, so which is exactly what I want. So now what I want to do is I want to actually play around with the tone of the shot itself. So I'm just gonna press Y again, and I'm going to close this brush here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and bump up the clarity just a little bit, just to see, you know, the clarity go up. One thing about clarity is that every time you bump up clarity, you must bear in mind that clarity will affect the way the image actually looks. It tends to lose saturation every time when you bring up the clarity. So do bear in mind that clarity will definitely make the saturation of your shot look a bit desaturated. So to compensate, as I mentioned earlier, every time when you do any adjustments, you need to actually keep on making sure that you actually you know, it's a push and pull game basically. If you change one thing, you have to make sure that you compensate for something else in another section. So sometimes when you actually change a clarity and some other a clarity in the picture, you do have to bear in mind that you're probably going to lose saturation. So you need to pull up the saturation if you bring clarity. And I also find that happens as well even with texture. So anyway, what I'm going to do is now I'm actually going to go down here in the menu, and I'm going to go to hue, and this is where all the color, you know, all the color controls are. So this is where you can change and adjust the hues for the colors. So I've got red, I've got orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple, magenta, and this one controls the hue. So hue is basically the sort of shade that those colors represent. So basically, if you turn it to the left or you turn it to the right, it's going to change the way a particular color is going to look. Whereas saturation down here will actually bring up the intensity of that color. So it doesn't necessarily change the color tone at all, but it brings up the saturation within that color itself. So in this case, I want to actually change the hue for the green leaves in the background, because I think I want it to look a bit more funky. So I think I'm just going to bring the green in the trees to be slightly different, just to make it feel like you're somewhere else, you know. So I'm just going to bring it to the left hand side to minus, wait, let me see now, probably bring it to minus 19. And what I want to do next is I want to bring the saturation up now. Don't go too crazy with that saturation, right? I kind of like that. And now let's just have a quick overview of what the picture looked like before, and now let's compare it with the after that I just did. So that's the before, as you can see. So immediately you can see that the picture on the right, which is the after shot, has got a bit more organic feel to it. It's a bit more warmer and it's a bit more pleasant. I'm just going to zoom in a bit tighter so that you can see even better. And I'm actually going to do this as well so that you can really see a proper side by side. So this. Now have a look at this. So immediately you can see that on the right hand side, the picture looks way warmer and it's got a nice, I think to me at least, it feels like there's a nice warmth about the picture itself. You know, it's not as cool as it was when it first came out from the camera. So we're still going to work on it and see how much more we can get out from it. So okay, let's go back to before and after. Let me just get to that screen again. I always get lost of this part, you know, so let me just, I want it to be side by side. Let me just do that. Okay. Alright, so now this is a proper before and after. So I think it's looking quite nice. And I kind of like it. So what I usually do is whenever I feel like I want to, sort of like edit it even further, I'll usually bring my photo into Photoshop. So let's go straight ahead and bring it into Photoshop and tweak it just a little bit more. So I'm just opening it up in Photoshop right now. And we're just waiting until Photoshop opens it up. Okay, so there you have it. So now it's open in Photoshop. So let's have a closer look at it in Photoshop now. Usually what I like doing in Photoshop are finer details. I find that when you actually want to edit zits or anything like that, you know, it is way easier and way more accurate to use Photoshop. So yeah, I do like using Photoshop for that. But I don't know whether you guys noticed this, but I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit closer here, because I somehow see that we've got a bit of a problem with chromatic aberrations. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close this picture in Photoshop and go back into Lightroom and try and get rid of this bluish tint here that's going all around. So this usually happens when you've got the aperture wide open, and it will actually affect the picture. So aberrations will appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight back to Lightroom and open it up in Lightroom again. And let's zoom into the picture to that problem area. So let's get rid of that part there. So yeah, here it is. You can see all these bluish stuff here. So there's an easy method of actually zapping that part away, because it's really not really nice, and it's not that flattering to see those bluish things there. So I don't know whether the compression that you guys are getting from YouTube, whether you guys can see this, but I can see it on my screen. There is a blue line coming here, and it's quite a pronounced chromatic aberration. So how do you actually get rid of chromatic aberrations? Well, it's really easy. Lightroom has a way of doing it which is so good. Hang on, let me see. Let me just double check. I hope I am on public right now. Okay. So what we're gonna do is I am going to turn on the lens correction. So here under the lens correction, go under the manual part here and bring down the defringe here. So immediately when you use the defringe under the amount, you can see that the blue tint disappears. So that's exactly what I want. So there you have it. I don't have any more chromatic aberrations there. And let's have a closer look there. Let's bring back the defringe. If I had it just now, well, can't really see much on Aina's one, but usually it tends to affect things that are brighter. So I can see on Azrin's shirt here, it's quite pronounced. But anyway, here it is. I'm going to bring it down to 7. And now immediately we have no more chromatic aberrations. And that's the wonderful thing I love so much about, modern day photography. You can do everything in this digital Lightroom. There's no need to actually go to the, the dark room and do all those sort of things. So it's fantastic. All right, so let's bring it straight back into Photoshop again. And we are going to open it up in Photoshop. There you have it. So now it's in Photoshop and we're gonna just fine-tune smaller stuff. I must say, I mean, both Aina and Azrin have flawless features, and so I hope they forgive me if I'm just sort of like, doing some minor stuff here and there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna get rid of maybe some minor spots here and there. So what I do is I use this healing brush here, and I'm just sort of like patching up some small parts here and there. But as I said, I mean, they have flawless features, so it's just as a training exercise that I'm showing you what I tend to do during my edits. Anyway, that's it. So what I'm gonna do is now I'm quite happy with how these things are looking right now. Let me just stop that spot healing because it sort of like spotted another spot. Okay, now what I want to do is I am actually going to zoom out just a little bit, and I'm going to move the picture here to the middle, and I'm just going to have a quick look and see where I'm at right now. So I'm quite happy with that so far. One thing is I don't really like to go overboard with editing, because the last thing that you really want to do is make a picture look really, really tacky. So that's definitely not something that you should be doing. Editing should always enhance a picture, and it should never be about altering a picture. Well, at least that's what I believe. And just in case if you guys hear kids screaming in the background, well, those happen to be my kids because it is lockdown and I've got nowhere else to go, and they're everywhere around the house. And I'm right now downstairs in the lounge trying to do this tutorial online. Okay, so now we're happy looking at that. So for me, I have this thing about, I always like using vignettes, because I find that vignettes tend to make things look more focused, because you don't have an image that is bright all the way through. So there are times that I do want to use vignettes to my advantage, because you really want the viewer to see your pictures and to feel like they're really focusing onto the picture itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat just a little, okay? I have to admit that. I have this plugin which I've left in the description of this video. You guys can click on it, and this plugin really does help a lot, okay? Since you guys want to know how I edit, you must know what tools I use as well. So in this case, I'm actually sharing with you guys the tools of the trade that I use, at least. So I am using this particular plugin, which are called Actions, and they are actions made by Totally Rad. And I've left the link of their website in the description, and you can actually buy their actions. So what actions are they are just a sort of like sets of presets which you can actually adjust things, and you can, yeah, basically they're just presets that people make. But the beauty about presets is that they're just like recipes, and you can mix and match things together to create a greater effect. So that's my trick, okay? I love using Totally Rad actions presets, because They allow me to mix and match stuff, and you get totally unique looks that you won't otherwise get if you're not you know, doing it with that. And it speeds up the process more than anything else. I mean, it really does help to speed things up, you know, because if you do everything from scratch, it's going to be a lot longer, and it's going to be a time waster. So presets more than anything else is a really beneficial thing to use. Okay, since I've been talking so long, let me introduce you to this totally rad preset. So basically on the right hand side here are all the different presets that I use. Well, of course I don't use each and every one of them, but I have been using them for many years now, and they're really cool. So as I mentioned just now, I said that I like introducing vignettes into my pictures because I think vignettes really help to focus in on the subject matter instead of making the photograph look just bright the whole way through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this particular preset, and it's called Easy Burn. So I'm just going to click on Easy Burn, right? And what's it going to do is immediately you can see it sort of like cause that sort of vignette effect. So it's darkened with an oval sort of shape all around the image. So now the subject matter sort of like looks a bit more focused, but of course you don't really want it to be that dark because that kind of looks a bit, you know, a bit overly darkened for the site. So what I like to do is I like to make it just sort of like a bit feathered off so that it doesn't look too pronounced. And if you can see, okay, this is totally without, right? And this is with full. And I'm just gonna go, I would say about 33%, right? You don't want to go too much into it, right? And yeah, I think that's quite nice. And this is another another action which I like from Totally Rad Actions, and this action is called O Snap. So what O Snaps does is O Snaps really sort of punches in and brings in the contrast and make things look a bit more punchy. So I'm just going to click on O Snap and let's see what happens. So it's just going to render it out, and so it's just waiting for the O Snap to take effect here. There you have it. So it's kind of a bit dark, but as I said, with actions you really want to use a bit of everything and you don't want to go overboard. So I'm just gonna lighten it just a little bit because I think that was a bit too dark just now. So I'm just gonna give it a really nice sort of like a lighter percentage, say about 22%. Okay, once that's done, I'm gonna click on the background image, right, to edit that part again. And I'm gonna go down to adjustments, and I'm gonna go to shadow and highlights. So in shadow and highlights, what's gonna happen is you're suddenly gonna bring out all the shadows in the background. Suddenly you start seeing all the details pop up again. So I'm just gonna bring the shadows and the highlights a bit down from what it was at default just now, because I felt that was a bit too much. And I'm just going to reduce it to about 14% or something like that, right? And I'm going to bring the highlights down as well. By bringing the percentage up, you are bringing the highlights down, but I don't want to go too over with that because you start getting this orange sort of effect on the skin tones. So you want to really avoid that, you know. That's one thing that you have to be careful with. In fact, yeah, I might not adjust anything there, I think. Just gonna bring the shadows and highlight just a little bit. Let me see now. Okay, I'm not gonna go too much into it. Right, I think 6%, really minor, okay? That's as much as I want it to be. So I'm just gonna click OK. Right, once you're done with that, let's have a quick before and after, looking at the history tab. when we first brought it from Lightroom. So that's when it first came from Lightroom, and now we've brought it in here. And yeah, I think it's looking pretty good and I'm quite happy with it. Yeah, I kind of like that. Another good trick that I do like doing is sometimes I like sharpening things up just a little bit, just to, you know, add sort of like, yeah, just to add more detail into the picture. So what I'm going to do is on the right hand side here, you can see all the actions and all the different layers the actions has made. There's the O snap, which I said earlier, and then there's the easy burn and all that. So I want to just flatten the image into one flat layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press function and F3. That's my setting that I use. That's my shortcut key. But what you can do if you don't have that, you can go into layers here, up here, and you can actually flatten your layers from this section here. It says flatten image. So it does the same thing, but I just did a quick button for that because I didn't want to waste time. Right, so once that's done, I think this image is looking pretty good, but I'm just going to change the curve just a little bit and bring the curve down just a little bit. By the way, if you guys got any questions at all, please feel free to ask me in the dialog box. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And I think that's okay. And I'm just gonna, I think I'm just gonna make their skin tone just a little bit warmer, I think. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into actions and try and put this particular actions on it. It's called warm it up crisp, and I am just going to reduce the warm it up crisp filter here and maybe put it about 15% or so and just see how that looks. Yeah, okay, I think that's looking pretty good, quite alright. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to save this and we can do a quick comparison to what we did. And I think, yeah, I think for me this image is pretty much done. I'm quite happy with that. I don't think I want to overly edit it because that would make it look a bit too much. And I'm just going to quickly save it onto my desktop and probably bring it back into Lightroom a bit later. Okay, so I'm just going to save the picture here. Again, if you guys got any questions at all, please feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to help out and, you know, answer your questions. Not an issue at all. I just want to have nice interaction here, you know. It's just light and easy and we're all just going to learn together because there's probably a lot of things that I don't even know as well. I mean, obviously, so okay, now we're gonna go to the second image. So what I'm gonna do is with this image, I somehow find that this image is really nice and I want to make it into a black and white image because I find that it's got a nice mood to it. So I think it probably worked best if it was black and white. Well, that's at least what I feel about this image. So the first thing I usually do whenever I want to convert something into black and white in Lightroom first is I'm just going to bring it into Lightroom here, which I've already done, and in the develop tab, which is up here already, I'm just going to bring it to black and white. Okay, so once it's in black and white, I'm just going to play around and tweak all the other things down here as well. So I'm going to try and tweak the exposure now and just have a look at what happens when I tweak the exposure. So right now I kind of like that because we are getting his forehead is not going to be too it's not going to fade too much into the highlight in the background, so I like that. And I am probably going to bring the clarity up just a little bit just to make the shot look a bit more defined. You know, you want to get more textures, especially when something is black and white, because you want that graphic element in a black and white picture. Oh, Akatsuki asked me whether it's JPEG or RAW. These are all RAW and they are from an EOS R. And I was shooting on an 85mm 1.2 Mark II. Alright, so I kind of like that. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to bring the shadows up. So bring the shadows up. And I am going to go to the brush tool. And I am going to brighten his highlights. You know, all the parts where there are highlights, I'm just going to brighten it. So just giving it a bit more brightness, you know. So I'm just brushing away his neckline here as well, you know. You can even do it on the suit as well, especially with the parts where there are highlights. It's always nice to actually bring the highlights out. So what I'm going to do is going to bring all the parts where the highlights exist, I'm going to actually make it brighter. Yeah.
You get the blue
Okay.
slippers?
Okay, so now I am actually going to I'm going to also brighten his eyes just a little bit here, just to make it sort of like come out just a little. Okay. Okay, I'm quite happy with that so far. I think it's looking quite nice. So once I'm done with the brush, I am going to I'm gonna bring the shadows out just a little bit and see what happens. I don't want to go overboard with the shadows, and I'm just going to bring the texture up also a little bit. So what texture does is the texture will make the shot look even more sharper, and it'll give it a nice sort of texture to the black and white image. So let's have a look and get it really close just to have a look. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. It's looking quite nice there. So now I'm quite happy with that so far. Yeah, so let's have a quick before and after. Have a look at before. That's the before and after. And again, I might want to introduce a vignette as well in this picture, just to sort of like make the picture stand out just a little bit. So gonna give it a bit of a vignette here and see what happens, just to give the focus onto the picture. And immediately you know, the image looks, to me at least, it looks really nice and moody, you know. So I kind of like that. I hope Azrian likes it as well. So okay, so that's the other image. Now I'm gonna go over to the next image, and in this image, the first thing that I see is I start seeing that there's something wrong with this picture. And the main thing that is wrong with this picture, I think you guys can guess as well, is the fact that you can already tell that the horizon, or the way he stands, or something like that, something about this picture looks like it's saying it, right? So I'm just going to correct the saying-itness of this picture. So here I am. I just did the crop tool, double click it, and I'm quite happy with that. Now I want to actually adjust the picture here. I do apologize because my kids are all over me right now, so if you do hear them in the background, just ignore everything, okay? Alright, anyway, let's change the temperature of the picture here. So I'm gonna bring the temperature up just a little bit more, and gonna bring the contrast up a little bit more, and I'm just gonna go a bit closer into the image. And again, like what I like doing is I am going to actually I'm actually going to brighten up the highlights in this picture. So I'm using the brush tool here, And I'm just going to brush over all the highlights so that it comes out a bit brighter. So yeah, it's looking a bit brighter, a bit better, so that you can see the difference between the highlights. Yeah. So if you actually want to do something that is, you know, a bit more to the skin, I would suggest you can actually even make the brush to actually brush on different color temperatures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the brush tool and double click on the effect so that it resets everything. And I'm just going to zoom on Azrin's face here. All right. And then what I am going to do is, hang on. Okay, oh, sorry. I accidentally deleted that. Okay. I am going to use the brush tool again, but this time I am going to make sure that the brush tool has a color temperature that's a bit warmer. So I'm just going to reset the brush tool, and I'm going to set the brush tool to have a warmer temperature now. So here it is, and I'm just going to brush over his face, so to the skin tone, and I'm just going to brush over his skin tone to make it a little bit warmer. So that will help make the very cold out of the camera look be, you know, gotten rid of, or so to speak, you know. So I'm just getting rid of that. And also what I'm going to do is, because I've noticed that the grass that, or the greenery all around the picture itself, actually it did affect his teeth, and the green did take a bit of a tint onto his teeth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush tool again, and I'm going to reset the brush tool, and I'm going to increase the exposure of the brush tool, and I'm going to decrease the saturation, because I plan to actually just whiten this part, because it actually took the color from the surrounding green. So I'm just going to reduce the green that tends to be tinted onto his teeth. Azrin's got nice teeth, so don't worry, Azrin. It's just the trees that sort of like affected your teeth in this shot. So now let's have a look. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. You can also bring the exposure down a little to make it not look ultra white, because then it will look a bit fake. And then also I've noticed that you can see chromatic aberrations as well in this shot, so let's correct those chromatic aberrations here. So go down into the lens correction under the manual setting, go down to defringe, and at defringe the amount, set the amount to about, I'll say about 7, and immediately you start seeing the chromatic aberrations here. The blue line has disappeared, so that's great. So let's just have a quick before and after look. There you have it. It's looking really nice and warm, and it's really, I think it looks really pleasant now. Yeah, so I think, yeah, so that's basically it. I mean, that's the 3 pictures that I've decided to actually do a quick edit on. I know it's not, you know, you can't possibly be editing this level of detail for each and every picture, but it's just to give you guys a guideline of how I actually edit my pictures. And yeah, so I guess it really goes to show that if you take your time to edit your pictures, it will definitely help out in terms of improving your pictures that come out directly off from the camera, because in this in this example alone, you can already see, right, that the picture itself is looking way more warmer, and it's looking way nicer than instead of it coming straight out from the camera itself. Anyway, I hope you did enjoy this short tutorial live session that I've decided to post up. I do intend to post more stuff like this, and I hope that you guys will tune in again next time. And I guess, yeah, see you guys in the next live session. So thanks so much for tuning in once again. And oh wait, who do I have here? Oh, okay. I just got one message here, and this person asked me, Ziri IU asked me, are you applying any preset before brush his skin tone? No. For this particular picture, I did not put any presets at all. It was directly, I just changed the warm tone in here, and I was just adjusting the warmth, the texture, the clarity, and all that. So I didn't use any presets for this. But if you do want some presets, one of the presets that I would recommend are Visco presets, because I've actually got Visco presets as well here. But I thought I didn't want to actually show you guys the Visco presets, because I thought it may not be that useful because you may not have the Visco presets. But anyway, Visco has a ton of wonderful presets. I mean, like over here, just quickly I can show you. This is Visco Film 04 for Canon. So they are presets, and they've got like hundreds and hundreds of different presets, and you can see it can really make a nice moody sort of shot that you can't really achieve just by adjusting on your own, because it will take ages. So for this particular one, I'm using a Fuji Fortia SP, and you know, that's just one of the look, but they've got hundreds and hundreds of presets here. In fact, I've hardly even used all of them because like there's just too many. But if you really want a nice film look with grain, I would definitely recommend Visco. Visco's got nice presets. But do bear in mind, whenever you use presets, right, don't just think that you can use the preset and you don't need to adjust things. The best way to use presets is that you use it and you apply it, and you need to adjust it according to the images that you are working on. So basically, you know, one preset is not one preset is, you know, a fix all kind of thing. So presets, to get the best effect out of a preset, you really need to work on it, and you really need to bring the best out of the preset by doing fine-tune adjustments to those things. You know, say for example, like this preset here is very contrasty, and it's called Fuji Fortia SP, right? So instead of just using this preset on its own, this is a before and this is an after, right? So this preset, yeah, I mean, if you like that sort of look, that very contrasty look, yeah, it's fine. It looks great. I think it's nice. But what you can do to actually maximize on the preset is use the preset and tune it down just ever so slightly to make it more optimized for that particular picture. So in this case, I've just used that preset and I've reduced the contrast a little, and I'm just going to bring up the shadows up so that his picture and his beard basically doesn't get sort of like loses its detail. So you need to work on those individual settings even if you're using presets. So a preset is not your ticket to just getting great pictures if you don't plan to adjust anything at all. So you have to remember that. That's very important. Right, so I hope that really did clear things up, and I hope that did help you guys.